Hello friends, welcome to Awdhesh Academy. We are now going to learn the different procedures under the GST. And the most important procedure in GST is start with registration. So today we are going to learn about the registration provisions in the GST. Let us first understand what are the different benefits for taking registration. So the first benefit is that the person is legally recognized as a supplier of goods or services. If you are a supplier and you want to prove that you are a supplier, and if you have a GSTian registration, then that is the best way to prove that you are a supplier. So that is one benefit of getting the registration. You can take the ITC on the input goods or services and use it for payment of GST on output services. Third, you are legally authorized to collect tax from the purchaser and pass on the credit of the taxes paid on inputs. Next benefit is that a registered person is eligible to avail different benefits from the government, for example, the benefit of refunds. The recipient and his supplies are not required to pay taxes under the reverse charge mechanism under section 9(4). As you are aware that if a registered person is purchasing anything from an unregistered person, then he is required to deposit the tax on behalf of the unregistered person. So if you are a registered person, then your recipient need not to pay the GST on your behalf under section 9(4). Let us now know the conditions for registrations as to what are the requirements for registrations. Who has to register? So the most important requirement is that if your aggregate turnover in a financial year exceed rupees 20 lakhs in the normal situation or rupees 10 lakhs in some special category states like Jammu and Kashmir, Manipur, Mizoram, Nagaland and Tripura. In that situation, you should take registration. A person who is already registered under the Central Excise Service Tax or State VAT Department should also take the registration. Let us now understand the definition of aggregate turnover, which is very important for the purpose of registration. The aggregate turnover means the aggregate value of all taxable supplies excluding the value of inward supplies on which tax is payable by a person on reverse charge basis, exempt supplies, exports of goods or services or both, and interstate supplies of persons having the same permanent account number to be computed on all India basis, but it will exclude the central tax, state tax, union territory tax and integrated tax and cess. It shall also include all supplies made by the taxable person, whether on his own account or made on behalf of all his principals. So the meaning of the aggregate turnover is that you have to take all types of output services or goods or both, whether it is taxable or it is exempted or it is exported, all that has to be taken into account when you are going to calculate the aggregate turnover. In the same way, even if you are let us say a dealer or a representative and you are supplying something on behalf of the principal, then also you have to take that amount of turnover for calculating the aggregate turnover. So we have understood that if your turnover is more than 10 lakhs or 20 lakhs, you should take registration. But there are certain categories of people who has to compulsorily take registration irrespective of their turnover. So the government has prescribed certain category of people who have to take registration whatever is their turnover. So these persons are as following. The person making any interstate taxable supply, they have to take registration. Casual taxable person making a taxable supply. A person who is required to pay tax under the reverse charge. Electronic commerce operator providing services under subsection 5 of section 9, that is specified interstate supplies. Non-resident taxable persons who are making taxable supply. The person who are required to deduct tax under section 51, person who make taxable supply of goods or services or both on behalf of other persons, whether as an agent or otherwise. So for agent there is no limit, you have to take registration compulsorily. Then input service distributor, the person who supply goods or services or both through electronic commerce operator who are required to collect tax at source under section 52. Every electronic commerce operator also has to take compulsory registration. Then every person supplying online information and database access or retrieval service from a place outside India to a person in India other than a registered person also has to take compulsory registration, and the government has been empowered to notify any other class of person who would be required to compulsorily take registration. So these are the categories of people who has to compulsory take registration whatever is their turnover. But the government has provided an exemption from registration to a small scale service provider by a notification that is 65/2017 dated 15th November 2017. And accordingly, all service provider, whether supplying intrastate, interstate or through e-commerce operator, are exempted from obtaining GST registration provided their aggregate turnover does not exceed rupees 10 or 20 lakhs. So important thing to remember here is that it is applicable only for service provider and not the supplier of the goods. This exemption notification also says that the exemption is not available for specified categories of services, the tax on intrastate supplies of which shall be paid by the electronic commerce operator. So in this category also this exemption is not available, and in the supply of goods it is not available, but it is applicable in supply of services. Let us now understand the salient provisions of registration under the GST Act. The law says that a person required to get himself registered in each state and union territory. So if you are having a business in all the states, then every single state you have to get yourself registered. Registration must be applied within 30 days of becoming liable for registration. A casual person or a non-taxable person should apply for registration at least 5 days prior to commencement of business. Single registration for every state, union territory which shall be used for payment of CGST, SGST and IGST. That means from the same registration you will be paying the central taxes, state taxes and integrated taxes. A person has the option to apply for a separate registration at his own choice for separate business verticals or business entities in a single state or union territory also. That means if you are having multiple units, if you are having multiple business premises, then you have the option that if you want you can have separate registration for each such business premises. Then you have to take separate registration for SEZ unit or the developer of SEZ. Then each registered person shall be treated as a distinct person. This is very, very important, that even though the legal person may be same, but for the purpose of GST, each registered person will be a distinct person. Then a person can voluntarily also apply for registration even if he is not required. So even if your turnover is say less than 10 lakhs or 20 lakhs, if you feel beneficial, then you have the option that you can apply for voluntary registration. Let us now know the effective date of registration. We know that if you have become eligible for registration or you have to require registration, then within 30 days you have to apply for registration. So if you apply within 30 days of becoming eligible for registration, in that situation, if the registration is given, whichever is the date, it shall be applicable from the date on which you have become liable for registration. If suppose you fail to apply for registration within 30 days, in that situation the effective date of registration shall be the date of grant of registration. So sometime this may be very, very disadvantageous to you, because if that date is late, then you may not be able to avail the input tax credit for the intervening period, and you can also incur some sort of tax liability and penal provisions because the clearances for that particular period has been without registration. In case of voluntary registration, the effective date shall be the date on which the order of registration is given. So friends, today we have learned about the important provisions of registrations, who must take registrations, who have to compulsory take registration. So registrations are very, very important. We will continue about the registration in the subsequent lessons. Thank you very much for watching this lesson.